August. We take 2 years off. It's a 10-month-long fundraise for this journey. So right now, out of the DECA jewelry and some of the school store funds, we have raised around $8,000. We do have a SNAP raise, which is an electronic fundraiser that we have been sending out to our family and friends, which gives them the opportunity to donate not only to individual students, but to as the organization as a whole, which is fantastic. We're expected to receive around $4,500 from that. And we also will be going around selling those chocolate bars that our school absolutely loves, that all the show choir kids and a lot of the students can't get enough of those. So we are projecting to receive another $960 from that as well. Currently fundraised, we have $13,460, which makes the net cost around $5,375 and $358 per person. However, we are obviously continually fundraising. We are soliciting businesses for donations to help kind of bridge this gap, and hopefully we want to leave as much money in the DECA fund for next year if the program stays around, which we are really hoping. We absolutely can't speak highly enough about the DECA program, and we're really hoping that through more fundraising we'll be able to leave more money for the students, the underclassmen below us, who will eventually be taking over from us.
How much money did we raise last year?
Last year we raised $27,000. Yeah, we raised.
We had more kids go out last year, but we have less this year. But that's okay. So we're still trying to push for all of us. I know that we only paid for our food and our baggage at the airport, is all the things that we paid for last year attending the international conference. So that was great for all of us. You know what I mean? It was no worries on our backs, and then obviously it was great. And we're reaching out to different companies and organizations. I know we broke it down to at least have each member that's attending the conference to reach out to at least 2 corporations or companies, family companies that you know of, to kind of try to get donations. Mrs. Era has been writing grants and to ask different corporations for money for us to attend this conference. So here's kind of just the breakdown of the itinerary of the conference. So like we had said before, it's attending from Friday, April 26th, all the way to was it Wednesday, May 1st? Yep. So here's just pretty much everything. From the time we get there, it's just nonstop the entire time. When we were in Atlanta, we had some bad weather. It was raining the entire time, so we're hoping for some nice, sunny Orlando weather. That would be great. So that's pretty much just all of the things that we will be doing.
Friday, they have a number of different activities. Again, it is a little smaller day because this is when most chapters arrive. We do plan on arriving through this day. So hopefully, by the time we get there, again, we haven't booked the flights yet because we want to make sure we get approval to go first. But Friday will most likely just be a travel day for us, and Saturday is when things really start kind of picking up. We have the DECA Day in the Parks, which is the Disney highlighted. Again, that would be the additional cost that the students would most likely pitch in for. There's a 5K run/walk that raises money for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. That is optional for the students as well. Again, we have to have this conversation with ourselves whether the group or not wants to participate in a lot of these things. There's a lot of the setup, and then we have the grand awards, the grand opening session at 8:30 p.m. And that again is last year was in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which was absolutely phenomenal. It was so cool to see that place. It is brand new. This year it is in the Orange County Convention Center, which is where all of the competition, in addition to all of the award ceremonies, will take place. Want to give them a Sunday?
Yeah, sure can.
All right. So Sunday this is when we test. Again, just a reminder of how we break down the scores for DECA. It's a written exam, one written exam, one part, one role play, and one part, another role play. So it's broken into thirds. 1/3 being one role play, another third being the second role play, and then the last third being the written exam. So for this, those who are competing, the 7 competing students will be taking a written exam, and all throughout this conference, the 4 given the leadership spots will be attending leadership activities, going through workshops. The underclassmen will have the opportunity to kind of bring something back to the school, bring something back to the chapter, really learn a lot on not only how to manage and improve yourself at DECA, but also how to run a chapter and how to become better professional business people. And the seniors have a special academy called SBR, which grants them interview skills, study skills for college, and more career-based skills that they will be using closer in the future.
I attended the conference last year, the leadership conference last year. It was a great time. I still talk to my friends from Washington, Utah. It was definitely great to make those connections because you kind of get placed in a small group for the entire time that you're there, and then you stay together the entire time, make great connections, as well as working on these different team building skills. Last year I went to Thrive, and it was honestly a great time, and I'm very excited to be able to go back again.
Monday is most of the day the students will be in competition. They'll have their 2 role plays scattered out throughout the days. They'll have some time in between. But ultimately, this is the competing day. This is the big day where students do their best, put on their best role play, and compete against over 20,000 students from across the world, which is pretty impressive, and it's a pretty amazing thing to see, especially when you're sitting in that room and you see someone from Missouri or Alabama or Ontario or Spain sit next to you. It's great opportunity to make some conversations, learn some new experiences, and so on and so forth. Tuesday is the last day we will be here. There's an achievement awards session in the morning, which goes over who scored highest in one role play, in role play 1 and role play 2, or in the individual test. In addition to the top 20 competitors, the top 20 competitors will be asked to perform another role play, and ultimately that role play will decide whether they come first, second, or third and earn glass is the trophy that DECA has, and we'll find that out by 8:30 p.m. and by Wednesday we will be all packed up, hopefully pretty tan, and coming back with some great new memories.
Sure.
Is there any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
Can you just mention about our advisor and how you presented her and what she got in there?
So for those of you who don't know, Mrs. Ayer is retiring. I'm sure all of you know, but Mrs. Ayer is retiring at the end of the year. So at the state conference, we had an opportunity to surprise her and bring her up on stage. Guy and I both wrote a little something and spoke in front of 3,000 members at the state conference. Gave her a little shout out, and again, we can't speak highly enough of her. It's being a DEC advisor really is like another part-time job. It goes 10 months, 11, 12 months of the year. We get what, maybe 1 month off? 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. So it really is.
Shocked. I managed to keep it a secret from her. Don't know how I did that.
They know me. I did not want for the limelight at all. So they did it for another advisor that was also retiring before me.
They'd better not.
Really
Yeah.
Michael, when they called me up and put his arm around the door, he goes, "Come on, Mr.
Let's go, right?
Stand there, there's over 3,000 people. And to be very honest with you, I told them I barely heard a word they said, because mostly I was flabbergasted. Once I got over the shock of being up there, at them, over 3,000 people, and they got up there like they owned the place. I don't know if you've seen the video, you've seen it. Like they own the place. I'll post it to the website. If you remember when they first started talking here in front of the school, Michael used to do this to drive him home. Okay, the guy would talk really fast with him. I could not believe it. That's DECA. That DECA did that for them. They got up there, and I thought to myself, if they can do this at 18 years old, what else can they do? Because Guy said his leg was shaking under it.
It's crazy. 3,000 people.
Thank you. Tell, and I just was. Then when I got to actually watch and listen to what they said after it was over, it brought me to tears. It really did, because it was very sentimental for me, and just so unexpected. But yeah, it killed me.
We may have to see that video here at one of our meetings in the future before the end of June. So
They certainly.
Got it.
We'll certainly get that up there.
Certainly come along. I'm very proud of them and what they learned to do.
Thank you.
And one other thing, Michael has gone every year since he's a sophomore. He's a 3-time winner. Every year he qualified for the international, and we're so proud of him.
And I think we've got the little JC and Emma, our sophomores, that may be following the footsteps of the Haleys. If you remember the Haleys, they started the same way, 10th grade, and never missed it, not a single year. So that's pretty impressive for 10th graders. They don't have hardly any background at all in business because they've only probably taken one course. They're in the middle of their first course. And it's just so impressive to have a 10th grader. But
Very
Michael
proud
did
of
the
them all.
same thing.
Yeah.
I'm
When he
curious,
was
do
a
you know offhand what category each of these competitors is in?
JC and Emma were in hospitality services team, and then Allie and Bonsor were in travel and tourism. And then Michael was in marketing communications, Vanessa was in business services marketing, who else? Rory was in human resources management. So yeah, pretty cool categories across the board.
All right, well, we're certainly very familiar with the international competition. So I would entertain, one question that I always ask is about the chaperones. Has the principal signed off on the number?
Not yet. but
Okay, so-
It's way over the
Yeah,
four
it's, like I said, it's
chaperones.
8-1, so we're bringing
We've
4
got a 10
chaperones
to
with us.
1, so it's way over.
Okay.
We've got
Mr. Lenzinski and I have discussed it, and
chaperones.
he approved verbally with me that
Okay.
There's
he's
4
aware of it
chaperones
and approves.
11 students, so.
All right. So I would entertain a motion to approve participation of our students in the TECA International Competition in Orlando.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Gagliardi, seconded by Mr. Botello and Mr. Guladucci. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Our
Thank
student
you.
representative is not with us this evening, so we'll move on to the superintendent's update. Mr. Schoonover?
Sure, let me just get this ready for a second.
Thank you.
Okay, I did just want to share publicly something that I shared with, in a memo with the school committee recently. The state released its graduation and dropout rates for the class of 2018 recently. So just comparing 2017 to 2018, for the class of 2017, we had 92.9% of our students graduated in 4 years, and we had a 1.7% dropout. And for the class of 2018, the dropout stayed about the same. As it went from 1.7% to 1.9%. Our graduation, 4-year graduation rate increased from the 92.9% in 2017 to 94.9% in 2018. We still did have, for the class of 2018, 2.3% of our students were still enrolled in school, and there is a small percentage difference there of a few students who received a certificate of attainment rather than a diploma, which happens each year. In addition to the 4-year graduation rate, the state also releases an adjusted 4-year graduation rate, looking at those students who entered the freshman class. So the class of 2018 when they were freshmen, so it doesn't take into account any students who transferred into the school after they started, because we can't control for students who transfer in, say, in the junior year or senior year. So the state has taken those students out just to see how well our the students who start here as freshmen, how well they do toward graduation. And in 2017, that rate was 94.9%. In 2018, it was 98.4%. And of those 187 students who graduated in 2018 and who started here as freshmen, let me see, the dropout rate decreased to 0.5%. So it was one student out of those original 187 who dropped out of school. So the numbers have improved just from 2017 to 2018, but I thought that was something that I just want to share with the committee, and this is something that we will see when the accountability numbers come out in the fall. This is one of those components, but we've made some progress from one year to the next. The next thing I just want to focus on was the advisory that took place today in the high school. I was hoping our student representative was was here to be able to give some student voice about what happened today. But the topic was on vaping. Vaping continues to be a topic that not only concerns us in this school, but I know every high school, every middle school around, everyone is trying to, is grappling with the same growing problem. So the high school put together this advisory where students watched a video. There were some discussions that took place in class, and students were asked to respond and provide some feedback. So I know that information was gathered today. I don't have, haven't received any of the official communications about it, but from what I understand, depending on which grade it is, there were a lot of positive comments that were made and suggestions from students, but we'll have to dig into that a little bit more to see exactly how we can handle the situation. I think one of the, I don't want to say it was a surprise, but certainly something that came out of this from what Mr. Lenzinski shared with me is that the clear majority of our students are not vaping. So I think it really is a minority of kids, but it has been a problem in not just Somerset Berkeley, but all high schools with vaping in bathrooms and students going in and feeling a little, I don't say unsafe, but just kids who are asking if they want to vape, and just kids feeling uncomfortable in those situations. So it is something that we are looking at, addressing it in our health classes. We've talked about creating some type of PSA or some type of PR campaign about vaping, sharing some statistics about it. Unfortunately, there aren't too many. We know that they're not healthy for anyone. We just don't know what the long-term effects are since it still is so relatively new. So we are trying to determine how best to approach this going forward.
And Mr. Schoonover, I know that there's a clear distinction between vaping regular flavored pods that are just vape air, but then there's also the capability to vape nicotine-based products as well as marijuana-based products.
Mm-hmm.
Is our school resource officer aware of this, or is our health department aware of this? Because that would be my concern, because now that crosses over into not just vaping, but using restricted things on our property that we talked about.
Yes, he is, and it is. We've had a few instances recently of students being caught with vapes with THC liquid in them. So it is something that the high school administration is keenly aware of. They are trying to tackle this problem, as is the school resource officer.
Vaping by policy is prohibited on school grounds.
It is.
So is it perhaps something we should take back to policy and review whether or not our penalties are stiff enough for what's happening, or?
We can look at that in the policy subcommittee just to see exactly what it is, and also looking at the student handbook.
Because clearly, if it's happening, on school grounds, whatever consequences exist aren't quite stiff enough to help curtail some of the activity.
Mm-hmm. And whenever something like this is happening too, we want to make sure the discipline is firm enough to deter the behavior, but we also want to make sure that there's an education component to it as well. And we've been looking into seeing if there is something where we can send students to as part of a discipline in order to receive some education about it, whether it's in-house or outside the school. So that is something that we've also discussed. I think we need to have that balance between the two things.
Speaking for myself and maybe the rest of the committee, I'd love to hear about what you guys come up with, because I do think that an education component is critical. Mm-hmm. But certainly we want to take whatever steps we can to keep our students safe.
And I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before, but there are some sensors as well that are on the market now where we can install in bathrooms, and they detect the vapor, and send notifications to administrators, the SRO, whomever we decide to send the notifications to. There are a few schools locally who have purchased some of these devices and have installed them. Right now, the feedback is a little mixed, so we're just waiting to. Everyone is waiting to see what some of these other schools, really how effective they are before investing in the installation of these devices in our own school.
I think it's definitely something that will stay on the committee's radar, because it's an issue the solutions are evolving, and we want to make sure that we're all part of it. I indicated to Mr. Schoonover today, I was talking with a high school senior over the weekend, just chatting, and at one point he said to me, it's ironic that we having all of this hoopla about parking passes when we have a huge problem with vaping that nobody's really talking that much about. So he shared some of his experiences about having to move from one bathroom to another because one was so full of students, and so it's definitely, I know the superintendent and the high school administration is concerned about it and working on it, and we'll want to stay up to date on it. And if there's anything that we can do or policy changes that could be made to help, I'm sure we'll be very happy to
I just wanted to add,
participate.
I do like the idea that of trying to create a campaign that the student population gets involved in too, to change kind of a culture where that's not accepted. I think that, as you said, it may not be the majority of students that are involved in this, but I think as a whole, if they can spread the message to their peers, I think that's good too. So I think, I agree, education, and certainly making sure that the consequences are commensurate with what the infraction is. But I think if we can create a campaign in the school, led by the students, I think that would be really great.
I'm not sure if any of the committee members, for those who received my family newsletter of about a week or so ago, but I did include a link to a video, and I believe that video was used in today's advisory, and it was produced by a school somewhere in the Midwest. I forget exactly where, but it was a very effective, I thought it was a very effective video that whether, depending on how much you know about vaping or not, it was educational. It really brought to light some of the problems with this. And as I was just saying too, we don't know what the long-term health effects are going to be from this. We can only imagine right now, but I believe the Surgeon General earlier this year referred to it as an epidemic. So it's causing many concerns for not just school officials throughout the country, but parents, doctors, everyone is really concerned.
Do you have anything else?
Well, that's all for now. Thank you. Oh, yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. Ms. Askell, would you mind sharing? Because tomorrow we actually have an early release day. And if Ms. Haskell can share about the PD plan for the high school?
Sure.
Thank you.
We have a variety of teams doing different things. Our departmental groups are going to be working in data teams. We've just had mid-year exams, so our departmental teams are going to be taking a look at the data related to our mid-years and some of the other data points that they have, and doing some data mining. It is that time of year, and our MCAS proctor training will also take place tomorrow. So anyone who is going to be an MCAS proctor, it's a mandatory training. That will be happening. Our fine and performing arts team will be working on curriculum design, and our nurses will be working on CPR recertification. So that's tomorrow.
Good. Thank you. All right. So it is 7 o'clock. I would invite anyone who is here who would like to move over. You might be able to see the presentation on the screen a little easier. like to note that Mr. Campos, Director of Facilities, Buildings and Grounds, has joined us. It is 7 o'clock, so at this point I would like to enter our public hearing, statutorily mandated, on the school budget for fiscal year 2020, 2021. And, excuse me, fiscal year 2020. And the public hearing has been duly advertised and will include a copy of the public notice with the minutes of this meeting. The hearing will begin with a brief introduction on the budget process by Mrs. Gagliotti, who chairs our budget subcommittee. Then we will have a presentation by our Director of Business and Finance on the fiscal 2020 budget. And then Mr. Larrabee will briefly discuss the Berkeley assessment. And then we'll be ready to accept questions from first municipal officials from Somerset and Berkeley, and then from any member of the public who might have questions. So, Mrs. Gagliardi, get us started.
Okay. So, first of all, I'd like to thank Mrs. Albernaz and the administration of the school for their work. They started long before the budget committee started meeting, which was in December, and putting together. And one of the things I think is important to note is that the district follows a zero-based budgeting process. So they ask all the department heads to really look at what the needs of the department, what the needs of the building will be in the upcoming year, and look at it from ground zero. And that information starts very early on in the process, and I know Mrs. Albernaz will go through the details of that pre-work. We started meeting with the administration in December, and we looked at that rather large number and kind of talked about where priorities are. And because we felt very strongly that it's important to put everything on the table in order to make smart decisions on where the resources should go. So we started with that, all that information that was brought to us. It's myself, Mr. Larrabee, Mrs. Field, and Mr. Pierce also attended many of the budget committee meetings. And so working with the administration, we started first with that kind of bird's eye view, and then we met with the not the content coordinators, but the department heads, the director of technology, the director of buildings and grounds, the special education director, and we also met with Ms. Haskell and the principal to find out in these different areas where the priorities were so that we could understand what decisions needed to be made as we went through the process. So without going into too much more detail, I would like to say that the budget that we've come up with is based first on the needs of the district, and we kept in mind what the vision and strategic plan for the district is. So we didn't want to just, we wanted to have a long-term view. And I know that some of us participated in that future search. That document actually helped guide the development of this budget. So I think it's important to note that. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Albernaz.
Thank you. So everybody has the handouts for the slide. There are some tiny fonts and some of them with lots of spreadsheets. So if you have any questions, if you could hold them to the end, that'd be great. But I'll try to do my best to kind of explain them as best as I can. So Mrs. Gagliardi started us off. We had started the budget process in November, where it takes 5 months to build a budget, and like you said, we use a zero-based budgeting technique, and it does take a long time to get the high school's budget to where it is today. So, strategic plan, obviously it's a roadmap for where we want to focus our efforts and financial responsibilities. FY20 is the final year of our strategic plan. We will be creating, well, the administration will be creating a new one starting soon for FY21 and going forward. But I think that I speak for everybody when I say we've done a lot in the last 5 or 4 years. It's been a very busy, forward-moving experience for me. I think we've done a lot of things to bring the high school up to the 21st century, as long as I've been here at least. And I thank Mr. Schoonover for that, because he has the vision and we just execute it for him on behalf of the students. So what drives the budget? Obviously our largest cost is staffing, fringe benefits as well. 72% of our gross costs are salaries and fringe benefits, i.e. retirement costs, health insurance, retirement health insurance, and unemployment, workers' comp, all of those things. We did recognize an enrollment change of an additional 27 students for next year. Both towns will be recognizing increases. I'll go through that on a later slide. Changes in contracted services. We just signed or we're going to be signing our new bus contract for FY20. We have contracted services for maintenance as well as technology. Special education tuitions and related services. That is the one budget item that you can throw a dart on the board and 6 months later it is completely different. So those are always things that we consider when we're building this budget, and it can fluctuate pretty rapidly throughout the school year. And obviously the fiscal climates of both member towns. Somerset's recognizing an increase of 18 students and Berkeley is recognizing an increase of 9 students for next year. So just a little bit of the timeline, like Mrs. Gagliardi said, started in November. It's basically me sitting in a room saying, let's project our salaries, let's project what our costs are going to be for things that we have really no control over, whether it's special education tuitions, special education transportation, our salaries. All of our contracts for next year, our collective bargaining units are settled, which I think is the first time that I've been in this chair that we've had a fiscal year where we knew what all of the salaries would be for the subsequent year. So then we meet with the directors, go through their asks and requests. The high school takes a little bit of a different approach, or at least has in the last few years, where we kind of wait till we get the Chapter 70 numbers that are published at the end of January before we start really diving in and shaving down the budget requests. But we are having conversations throughout the way that, you know, if we have to let certain things go, we will. If for some reason the Chapter 70 numbers don't come in where we think that they would. So January, February is pretty busy. As you can tell, the last fall we have lots of budget subcommittee meetings. We started in December, our first budget meeting on December 6th. We were at a 5.95% increase in our budget. Today we're at 2.53%. And at the last school committee meeting on February 28th, we did vote for a preliminary FY20 budget. I will say the last few years, and I'm sure administration would agree, it's a little chaotic to get the content coordinators' budgets in January, so I do recommend, this is really just more for the budget subcommittee for next year, that we go back to the way that we used to do it and we request the content coordinators submit their budgets by November. It's just easier. I know that we were trying to see what the Chapter 70 numbers come to and then ask the coordinators for their input, but it's too tight of a timeline, so that would be a recommendation. So just the highlights, our FY20 gross budget, which includes our general fund plus all of our state and federal grants and revolving funds, is $19,123,939 minus our revenues, such as circuit breaker, our federal IDEA grant, our Title I grant, athletic revenues, and a myriad of other revenue that comes in, brings our general net budget to $17,609,464. Which includes $15,425,75 of operating costs, $2,184,389 for debt service. As indicated before, it's a 2.53% increase, or $380,538. We did see an increase in our projected revenue, which is in a later slide that I'll go through. So we kind of we started out our budget with, you know, kind of looking at the scheduling work that was going to be happening, positions that were needed to support education. We did push for a part-time grant writer position, which we are splitting with K-8, or at least hopefully we'll split with K-8 because we do feel like this is something that we've been talking about for many years, and we'd like the opportunity to find alternative revenue sources to support the needs of the students. We are requesting an additional special education transition teacher. This is to supplement the students who have graduated, but we are still required to provide educational services to them until the age of 22. So we had started a program a few years ago, but we're at the point where we do have additional students that we would need to have another teacher and support those students that are continuing on at the high school, but they've turned 18. We would also require a paraprofessional for that transition program classroom. One last additional person is a special education teacher for our co-taught instructional strategies classes. I'll go into detail more with that on the later slide, but that was something that we thought was definitely a need for next year's budget. And we are recognizing, due to the scheduling changes, a reduction of 2 full-time teaching positions. The reductions in the position costs is about $124,000. This is pretty much the same cost as what any salary increases over 2% would come out to be dollar-wise. And then just the net in positions is $32,336, or 0.21% increase over this current school year's budget. So the transition teacher and the paraprofessional, like I had said before, we have our transition program where these students, they come to school, but they're also on the community learning life skills. They go to places like Eau Claire's and Stop and Shop and a myriad of other places within the town of Somerset and some of the outlying communities. We transport them. We have our own 7D driver that's on staff here that works with these students. So we utilize our own vans to bring them to the community and do different types of service work and get them out and acclimated. Because 18 to 22 is a very significant age where they have to be able to have some life skills, and we think it's very important that this program not only was developed, but is still being developed even 3 years later when we started it. Obviously, a paraprofessional is needed. Some of these students do have the need for additional support in this program. The second position is the special education teacher for our co-taught classrooms. Essentially, what an ideal co-taught classroom is a ratio of 50% regular ed students, 50% students who are on IEPs. We are at the point where we're flip-flopped, and our regular ed students are outweighing the, our IEP students are outweighing the regular ed students, which does not keep us in compliance. So what we're trying to do is kind of move into a new classroom with the students on IEPs and have another teacher available to them so that we can have some more regular ed students and have more of a 50-50% ratio for that classroom. This is something that we feel is 100% student-centered as it comes to the students with IEPs, and it is needed to stay within the regulations of DESE. Some other operating costs increase that you'll see, like I indicated before, our bus contract is going to be starting July 1st of 2019. We are recognizing an increase of about $70,000 due to that contract being signed. However, we are only recognizing a total transportation charge increase of about $18,000, and that's due to some reductions in our special education transportation for next year. We are going to hopefully apply for a contracted service with a field maintenance vendor. If you go and look at the athletic fields, they are not where they need to be. We do feel like we're at the point where we need to get consistent contractors out here to do fertilizer, weed spray, herbicide, aeration, and seeding for our athletic fields. A cost of $27,023. At a later school committee meeting, I will be presenting our long-range maintenance plan for this building. It's a pretty lengthy document, but one of the things that we had identified early, Mr. Campos and I, is that there are things that have to be done. It doesn't have to be done every year, but window cleaning is one of those things that we have 3 stories. We do not have a lift that will get us to that 3rd story, and we feel that it's something, the external windows that are that high up need to be cleaned. They haven't been cleaned since we opened the building. So to maintain the building, there's a cost associated with it. and we feel this is something that we should probably plan on doing every other year or every 3 years, starting with FY20. Total estimated cost of about $4,000. I don't know about you, I think $4,000 is worth it, because I would not want to be up on a lift in the 3rd story outside cleaning the windows, so that's just me. But the other increase that we'll see is our Bristol County Retirement Assessment. We are seeing an increase of about $75,000 for next year. This is an assessment that we receive in the fall every year for the subsequent fiscal year. It does take into account certain unit costs for each municipality. So they look at your population, they look at your demographics, how many, the ages, the health of your active employees as well as your retirees. So that assessment does fluctuate depending on what your population of people that pay into Bristol County are at that point in time when they do the assessment. And then one last thing is the teacher laptop renewal. We gave the teachers new laptops in fiscal year 14. That was before we actually were in this building. And they're end of life. And so we think that it's time to start a renewal cycle and lease some new laptops for the teachers starting next year. We'll finance that over 3 years. Cost of about $9,100 for FY20. So this is the foundation budget for FY20 for the high school. It's something that I go through every year because I do think it's important for the public to know what the state is saying that our budget should be for the high school. They do this for every school district, whether it's regional or a department of a town. So I'll go through just some highlights. They break us out into brackets. We have, the 1,012 is really a summation of 967 high school and 45 vocational students. These 6 columns, I'm sorry, I should have just said these two, but these columns represent incremental increases in the base for the regular high school and vocational students. So essentially, they're saying that of your 967 regular high school students, it should cost about $9.2 million, broken out by these categories. The vocational students, because vocational programs tend to be a little bit more expensive, each vocational student gets about $14,372, while a regular ed student would get $9,526. On top of that, we get an incremental increase for special ed in-district, which is 3.75% of our total budget, or our total foundation population. And our special education out-of-district is only really 1% of our foundation budget. It is not based on a per pupil, it is based on a percentage of your total budget. So $29,458 for a special education out-of-district tuition placement. Our average tuition for FY20 is $84,000. So it does not even come close to what the actual cost of something like a special education out-of-district placement costs. And then last category is our ELL students, English language learners. Because of the services that are required for those students, we have to have additional supports. So on the bottom in red, and I know you don't have this on your slides, but it does break out the incremental cost for each of those. Employee benefits, the state is saying it should really cost us $1.1 million. It's really looking like $2.5 million for next year. So those are the kinds of things when we talk about, your budget's this, or it's this far above net school spending, there are some real factors as to flaws in this foundation budget. So I'll go through some of them at a later slide. And one thing that I wanted to just bring up, and I know that Mr. Schoonover is excited about this, is that they have started to give recognition for schools that are doing early college or innovation pathways. So the actual incremental costs for those, if we did have any in a standard form, which I know we're working towards, it's about $10,500 in additional as compared to a regular high school student. So we get a little bit of a bump for those kinds of programs that I'm sure we'll see in the near future. Okay, just some more net school spending analysis. I did break this out based on our FY18 foundation budget and actual expenditures as reported to the state in the form of our end of year report. Both the foundation budget and actual spending excludes transportation, both for regular ed students and for special ed students. As you can see, we have some increases or overages in instruction, pupil services, which is our athletics, school nurse, clubs, and school security. The biggest outliers is the employee benefits and fixed charges, 1.4 million over what the state is saying we should be spending. Special education tuitions, 917,000 over what the state is saying we should be spending. Again, there is not a lot of wiggle room, especially when it comes to special education tuitions. It just goes more to the conversation of, would you cut your education, your instruction by 1.4 million just so these two could net to zero? It's not possible. I don't think that it works, and I think that that's why the state is looking to make some changes to the foundation budget formula. So there is some new goals being phased in for the foundation budget starting next year. I showed this slide at the Somerset Public Schools budget hearing as well, just to kind of see that we're kind of closing the gap on some of these things. One of the goals that they have is to increase the foundation budget for pupil for out-of-district tuitions 3 times to what the current increment is per student. So I think that that's something that is not going to get there overnight, but they are recognizing that both out-of-district tuitions as well as health insurance premiums for our faculty and staff, those are the 2 biggest skewed numbers. And I think if you ask any other school district around, they'll say that those are the 2 biggest numbers where they are so far above foundation budget that there's really no way to come back from that. And this is, I mean, I know that this is for a middle school, but this is just something that that I thought was interesting. They're closing the gap for, you know, what our FY20 budget would be for benefits and fixed charges for just a regular middle school student is $1,069. They're pushing for $1,610. Same thing for guidance and psychological, $314 to $378. I think why guidance and psychological is in there is because of the social and emotional needs of our students now. It's kind of a new thing that school districts really are trying to be proactive with the actual needs that it takes to get you know, more guidance support and more social and emotional supports in the form of a school adjustment counselor or a position equivalent to that. This is something that we showed last year just to kind of show where the district falls as far as our swing of Chapter 70 aid and also what the member towns pay. Somerset Berkeley is right around here, right in the middle in red, but there are some comparative schools. Whitman-Hanson is here. They are mostly funded by state aid, but and their local contribution is a little bit lower. And then as we go up here, Dighton-Rehoboth, there's a split there, Freetown-Lakeville, King Philip, and OR. OR being limited state aid and having a lot of local contribution to support their budget needs. The required contribution analysis for the town of Berkeley. I go through this usually pretty quickly, but if there's questions on this afterwards, I'm happy to ask. I kind of tend to fly through things just because I've been staring at it for so long that I understand it, but I understand that there's a lot of data on this sheet. I want to be able to have people ask questions if they need to. So every year, what the state does is they take a foundation budget for each of their school districts in which they are a member. So for the town of Berkeley, and we'll start with Berkeley, they have Berkeley K-8, Somerset Berkeley, Bristol Plymouth, and Bristol County, which is known to us as Bristol Aggie. So what they do is they take all those foundation budgets that we had just talked about in the previous slide, and they add them all up. Then what they do is they take a percentage based on property values and residential income. If for FY20 it's 52.1%. They multiply that across the board times that school district's foundation budget. What that does is it gives you a minimum local contribution. So at a minimum, for Berkeley, Berkeley has to pay $150,904 more than what they paid last year. If the budget stayed the same, everything's staying the same, they would have to pay $150,000 more. So I think it's important when we talk about assessment populations that, or fluctuations that, you know, this formula is probably the most important one when it comes to an assessment fluctuation throughout the year, because you could have, like just Berkeley K, you have 769 last year, 742, or 769 this year, 742 next year, but you're still paying $128,000 more than what you would have, and you have a drop of 27 students. So it's just one of those things, it's a very, you know, complicated formula, but if you can if you can understand it and you can plan for it, it's something that you can kind of explain when you're talking about your budget. And this is just the same thing, but just more. And we talked about this at the budget subcommittee, where looking at the high school's assessment, you really have to just look at the 3 high school communities to kind of get a gauge on where you think the minimum local is going to be for that subsequent year. So right now, 73% of the population of high school students that live in Berkeley are going to Somerset Berkeley, 24% are going to Bristol Plymouth, and 3% are going to Bristol Aggie. Same for Somerset. I won't go through it in as much detail, but they're also recognizing a $68,000 increase, just based on the fact that their minimum local last year was 4.3, this year it's about 4.4, and that's just with 16 additional students. So, okay, back to the budget. This is our gross budget for this upcoming school year and the prior school years. This is on a gross basis, so what it is all of our costs for the general fund, for our athletic revolving fund, for our circuit breaker, our IDA federal grant, our Title I grant, homeless transportation, regional transportation, all of the funds that we roll into our budget are on this slide. So we're looking at $16,939,550 just for operating costs on a gross level. I did throw this in there afterwards where it does not include debt service, because debt service is kind of not considered operating, but I just wanted to throw that in there so you can kind of get back to that beginning gross budget number on the first few slides. Obviously increases, salaries and benefits, technology, special education tuitions, school choice and charter schools. We are seeing an increase in our assessments for our school choice students and our charter school students who are not attending Somerset Berkeley for next year. This is just a quick pie chart explaining that. Obviously you can see salaries and benefits are 72%. We also have our district revenue sources. Like I had said before, they do offset that gross budget. I won't go through them in detail, but you can kind of see where the breakouts are, circuit breaker being our biggest one, and assisting with paying for special education tuitions. Same with our IDA grant. 100% of those 2 grants, for the most part, go to special education tuitions. And then we have our school choice revolving fund, which funds a majority of our guidance department, regional transportation aid that we get from the state, and just some other ones. Our athletic fees that started 2 years ago, and some athletic revolving funds, which is essentially our gate receipts for our football and basketball games. And those go into the fund to support paying for expenses related to athletics. This is just historical changes in our net operating budget throughout the years. We're at 2.5% for FY20, $380,000 increase. The breakout is below. Our operating expenses are 577 higher with our increased revenue sources, which drops our actual net budget increase down to 385.38. This is our capital budget. This is the debt service that I was referring to before. It's based on the amortization schedules that are set by the 5 bonding bonds that we have issued over the last few years. Every year the principal amount changes, the interest amount changes, and what we do is if we had a premium when we went up to bond, we return that premium throughout the life of the bond. So you should be seeing these credits for the next 20 years. The only bond that we did for a 25-year was our very first one in 2014. The rest of them are 20-year bonds. And this is entirely split out based on student population fluctuations between the 2 towns. Okay, so I'm not going to go through that because that's really big. But what I will do is, if you're looking at it and you feel like reading something before bed tonight, this is our assessment sheet. This is FY19s. This is FY20s. So what I'm going to do is over the next slide, I'm going to break the top half down. So you'll see this side on that side of the screen. Anything lower you'll see on this side of the screen. So our assessment based on the regional school district assessment document is a convoluted one, but it is pretty straightforward. once you understand it. Basically what we get is, this is just our total budget that includes debt service. Right here you'll see the fluctuation of student population, 742 in Somerset, 270 in Berkeley, 73.3%, 26.7%. And that's important. This is a very important split too for some of these things. Minimum local is right here. That's step one. That is the minimum local amount that I had indicated on a prior slide. That basically says the state is saying at a minimum you have to fund this much for education. This is the number that can fluctuate a lot. Like I said before, Berkeley is going up 150,000, Somerset's going up about 75,000. Then you have what our budget is minus that minimum local. So it's 9 million, split exactly what these proportionate shares are. 6.8 for Somerset, 2.5 for Berkeley, and then you'll see the increases over prior year are right here. You don't have the prior year, but you can look at it on the previous slide if you want later. From there, it just gets added up. So the 1.6, 2.5 is up to 4.1 for Berkeley, 4.4, 6.8 is up to 11.3 for Somerset. From there, we come and figure out what each community is getting for Chapter 70 aid. So what that number is basically your foundation budget, which we went through on a prior slide. This is what, at a minimum, you need to be spending on education in total. Your minimum local comes right off of that. Anything left over, the state will fund in the form of Chapter 70, so that your foundation budget isn't underfunded. So that's where that number comes from. Somerset's seeing a significant increase in Chapter 70 for next year of about 491,000. Berkeley's seeing about 82,000. From there, we take our other revenue sources. These are revenues that come in and get deposited directly into the general fund. They are not in a separate revolving fund. They offset the assessments, and that's the way that the agreement was set up. We have our charter school reimbursement, interest income, Medicaid and E-rate, and then our television production revenue source, just from the town of Somerset for the cable access work, an agreement that we had signed a few years ago with them. So these two decreased numbers, you know, they bring that assessment down a little bit. It looks a little wonky, but that's what the negative's for. Then from there, you basically just take step 3, minus your Chapter 70, minus your other revenue sources, gets you to your operating assessment. We do have to return a small portion of our E&D back as a result of our FY18 E&D figure. That is split entirely based on population, which is up here, and then that's the new revised operating assessment. Capital assessment is 100% split based on population. So if you take 2.1 million times 73%, you're at 1.6. Same thing for Berkeley, 582,000. Your total assessment is 11,662,836. Somerset's recognizing about 8.5 million, while Berkeley recognizes about 3.1 million for FY20. So in total, Berkeley's operating assessment is going up about 4%, Somerset's is going down 5%, and Berkeley's capital assessment is going up slightly, and Somerset's is going down slightly. So changes to the historical changes to the assessment, just so you can see since FY14 how the assessments have kind of shaken out. We started at 7.6 million in Somerset in FY14, we're down to 6.9 in 20. Berkeley went from 1.6 million to 2.6 million in FY20. And that was planned due to the regional district assessment and how it was made to slowly get Berkeley up to target share for funding education. Sorry, just because the question always comes up, I'm throwing this up there. As of June 30th of 18, our E&D balance is 872,141. As of January 31st of this fiscal year, the balance of our stabilization account is 406,980. When I do discuss the long-range maintenance plan, that stabilization account will be probably planned to be utilized for some of those items when we do present that. I don't know at this point which items will be funded, but it would be something that would be considered when we start talking about annual budgets and what we want to do for maintenance in the form of replacing equipment or completely redoing something. And then in summary, we have Again, our budget 2.5% higher than this year. We have our position staffing level changes. This was a difficult budget season. We did really start at a zero-based budget, and then, you know, we didn't ask for too many new things that wouldn't be considered a level service budget. You know, and just some of these things, you know, the teacher laptops, the part-time grant writer, and the athletic field maintenance, we do feel that they are something that the school district does just need to invest in, but they are not something that we had for this school year, so those are why those three things would not be considered level service. The special education teacher, you can kind of have the argument of whether you think that's a level service item or not. We do feel that keeping a ratio of 50-50 in these co-taught classrooms is something that is required. Therefore, we do think it is level service to have this position, but you know, we can kind of understand why people would not see that way. And then just in closing, the figures are $17,609,464 for our general fund budget, which is broken out by $15,425,75 for operating costs, $2,184,389 for debt service. Any questions?
So if I can just take a quick minute to first of all say thank you to Mrs. Albernanis for all the work that you put into the budget this year and every other year. And on behalf of myself, I know that her involvement with us at the town of Berkeley during the override over the previous two budget cycles was tremendous, and we couldn't have gotten through all of it without her. As everyone knows, this is her last budget presentation, so I just want to take a second to say thank you for all your hard work and everything you did over the years.
Thank you.
Mr. Pierce alluded to the beginning of at the beginning of the presentation that I would take a minute to talk about population fluctuation. As anyone who had the misfortune of listening to me speak 15 times in Berkeley in 2017 and in 2016, or 2018 and 2017 knows, population is very difficult to pin down and has a very dramatic impact on our assessment here at the high school. The increase in students this year is 9 students based upon last year's figures, but the actual enrollment is up 5 students. You know, obviously they use the October 1st population to calculate the assessment, but the net number of students that are up is 5 over last year. BP had 93 students in the previous year. This year they have 89. Bristol Aggie had 12, now they have 10. So that change in population works out to be about 1.55% more of the high school students, the high school population in Berkeley, are choosing to attend Somerset Berkeley, which is clearly our goal. We want more of our students in town to enjoy what we have to offer here at the high school, but that makes it difficult to stay within a 3% cap. So as we spent an awful lot of time talking about during the override cycle, the increase in population works out to be 1.55%. As you can see from the budget that was presented by Mrs. Albernanis, we are not 1.55% over the 3% cap. We're a little over 1% over the 3% cap. So what we are asking, and as was presented to our friends at the FinCom this week, and we alluded to this during the override cycle, there needs to be some sort of way to allow for that population fluctuation to ebb and flow in the budget and through the general fund on an annual basis. There are certainly going to be years looking ahead, as we did at FinCom, where there's the potential for a population to shift downward. And that could be to Berkeley's benefit. Last year, as we know, our assessment was only up 0.7%. That added a great deal of fuel to the ability for us to pass the override, because our assessment was up well below that, and last year population was down 1.27%. So certainly you can't turn a blind eye to how much of an impact population shift has. And I think it's ironic that the number that we started with was 4%, and this year 4% would have probably been just fine. So as we look forward, ask our municipal friends and folks in local government to be as active as you have been. I'm pleased that 2 of our sitting selectmen are here, as well as the chair of our finance committee. So I'm glad that everyone is involved, and and wanting to hear about what's happening here, not only with the budget, but also with the other good things that folks had to share. I think it's important to note that we're doing the best we can, and population shift is certainly something that we're going to contend with, not only in this budget, but every budget going forward. I have a beautiful chart that I passed out to FinCom, so I'm sure Joe will share it with you guys as well.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? All right. So in addition to the Berkeley representatives that Ms. Larrabee mentioned, I don't know if you want to introduce them.
Sure. Okay. With Jill Freitas, who's the chair of our finance committee. We have Wendy Cochran, who is a selectman, our town treasurer, and our town tax collector. And we have Heather Martin Sterling, who's also a selectman.
And we welcome Chris Gaudette, who is the chair of the Somerset Advisory and Finance Committee. So we're open to questions from any of you. Gaudette?
Thank you for putting the E&D balances slide on there. I feel like that took a little thunder away from one of my questions, but I did see that the homeless transportation was in the budget at $5,000. I didn't know that we still had homeless transportation students in the community. Maybe we do, but I thought we kind of did away with that program.
Well, I'm glad you raised that question.
Thank you.
Because I wanted the people in town to understand that these are mandated charges. And in the warrant that we're approving tonight, we have a transportation expense of $1,400 to transport a Somerset Berkeley Regional High School student from Berkeley to Brockton. Students have the option of continuing to attend school in their home community, even though they reside within the school district. So this is just an example. I'm not sure how long a period that's being paid to Fall River Taxi Service to transport that student on a daily basis. And that's a statutorily mandated expense that the people in our communities have to bear, and there's no choice. Do you know, Mrs. Albanez, how long a period that
I'd have to look at the invoice. I don't recall off the top of my head.
All right, but I'm pretty sure that's not an annual cost. It may
It's
be over
probably like 6 weeks. If that.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
So, understand that while we're not housing a significant number of homeless children in Somerset anymore at the motel, we still are incurring some of these costs.
Okay. It sounds like I teed that one up for you, but it was not pre-planned by any means. I noticed you mentioned there was some additional school choice revenue in the budget. How many additional school choice students from last year compared to this year are being planned for in the 19 budget?
I think we planned for around 55. What we are actually getting this school year for school choice is more revenue than we anticipated getting. And it's not just because of additional students. You know, it doesn't go from like 50 to 70 and you get, you know, X amount of dollars. It really depends on, if it's a regular ed student who doesn't require any additional services, it's about 5,000. If it's a student that is on an IEP and it's written in their IEP and documented, we do get incremental additional revenue for them because it does cost more to service a student, whatever their IEP says. So we are getting a little bit more than what we thought we were getting for FY19 in the form of revenue. So we're throwing some of that into next year's budget to offset some of the costs for guidance.
Okay. And once again, thank you for asking that question, because it provides us...
I'm here to serve it up for you.
Because it provides us with the opportunity to address the issue of school choice, which is occasionally raised. And we've learned, we have some experience in dealing with school choice, and I think we've set some specific parameters on school choice. We found that when we were accepting school choice across all 4 classes, that we were losing some students in the upper grades because they were transferring here because they were having problems in one place. Sometimes they brought those problems here and then they were gone again. So our policy now with respect to school choice is we only accept new school choice students in the freshman year. And we look at that number, we look at the demographic of the freshman class, and we have a goal of having approximately 250 students in each class. And so we vote every year to approve the number of school choice students, and we generally approve the number of slots that will bring our freshman class to about 250 students. And we feel that doing this helps us with the goal of maintaining an enrollment at the high school of about 1,000 students. We also feel that we can accommodate this number of students without any real additional cost. Having perhaps 10 to 15 additional students in each class, there should be room in the classes at those levels to accommodate that number of students without additional faculty. And we have a lot of fixed costs that we pay that are covered whether we have those additional 50 or 55 students. So we think it's a wise thing, and as you can see from the presentation, in the FY 2020 fiscal year, we're expecting to generate about $490,000 in revenue. Did I present that accurately, Mr. Schoonover? You did? Okay. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Julie?
No, I was just going to say that's looked at on an annual basis, and that funding has been used specifically for our guidance department, if I'm not mistaken. So the money that comes in for school choice, we have to ensure that that is used for student services, and so we've targeted that to our guidance department.
So that kind of segues to my next question, that I see that the population of general population is over 1,000. At 1,012, 55 students, that gets us up to 1,067 or so. I know they said the school was built for 1,000, but I see that we're trending upward. I assume we don't have any problems with classroom sizes, crowding, or anything like that. Just because we're experiencing some of that at the lower grades in town, I just want to make sure we're not experiencing that in this building.
I was going to ask, the 55, I'm glad you let me into it.
I mean,
But
we went through all this before, right?
It's like it's a routine.
So the 55, the number 55 represents not necessarily all new spots, but existing students who have started as freshmen and have gone through. So unless I'm misunderstanding your question, we may not bump it up to 1,200.
No, I mean, I think Sabina mentioned that 55 students is the school choice. The general population is 1,012. I think that excludes school choice because it's part of the town calculation. So we're at 1060 or so. I'm assuming that the school can easily handle 1,060 students, but I want to make sure we're not getting into overcrowding, more teaching because of our population getting a little more than what the state told us our school was going to be built for. So.
If I may, just those enrollment numbers were based on the October 1st enrollment. I don't know what the exact breakdown is today for Somerset students, Berkeley students, and school choice students, but we do have 1,033 students enrolled in the school as of today, including students in our 18 to 22 program. So really 1,030 students are in grades 9 through 12. It's not 1,067 as those numbers would lead you to think.
And we look at the school choice numbers, and if we find that, I think one of the things that causes us to be a little higher is because we look at the demographic of the incoming freshman class that we can pretty much identify in the spring when we're voting on the school choice positions. But we've had some unexpected, I think, enrollment increases between, say, May and September, with folks moving into town and having a few additional students, but that being the case, we'll, you know, at least my goal individually is to keep our classes around 250, so we will be making adjustments if necessary.
And last question for me is, I noticed that the capital assessment, the total dollar amount was down by slightly. Are those variable rates that were?
Payments of principal, I believe.
But I just would expect them to go down.
It's the same amount every year, so it's the level. The total principal and interest every year is the same number. What does change is that credit amount that gets deducted. It's returned back to the towns.
Okay.
When we did FY19's budget, we had that last bond that we didn't know what the interest rate was going to be. Now that we've done that, that could have been the reasoning why for the change. But going forward, the capital assessment will not go higher than what it is. Right. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, for the Somerset side, it's difficult to have any major issues, right? We're down 300,000 for the year. 60 years or so, we're down about $700,000 assessment. So it's kind of difficult for our side or so to really make any big major.
If you were real friend, you'd split out different.
Well, I mean,
if you want to be a real community, let's go with that. If you feel really bad about it.
Well, I never said I felt bad. Right?
He feels bad, but he can't reach.
Right.
Yeah. You know, we've got some things going on in the town, but it looks like, you know, the growth side of things, it looks like a pretty responsible budget with you know, a net one staffing, which is, you know, can't really think about that. I appreciate you guys mentioning, you know, trying to get or meeting the level services that the town is trying to be at in our town right now. We're trying to be a level services community right now. So I appreciate you reaching for that and at least mentioning it in the presentation. So I don't really have anything further.
I will echo, speaking with Mr. Larrivee Monday, as we talked about fluctuations, and that was a huge issue during the override concerns, and seeing that this year it hit us, and we talked about that cap, a 3% cap. Looking at this budget and coming across at 3.4, really, the total cost. It's something that we have to, as a community, find a way to be able to control those costs. But I think the big part that we have to really concern ourselves is with, and we don't have any control, is the valuation that the state puts into that mandate and its process. So looking at and talking to Dean on Monday, the only big concern that we had as a finance committee was possibly the additional of a special ed teacher. Some of the monies that were going to be allocated to turf management, that was something that we talked about. But as far as the finance committee on our side, we were pleased actually that it wasn't overly budgeted. So looking at it, I think you guys did a great job trying to get this down as close to the 3% as we could, and still be able to support the Berkeley students that come to Somerset Berkeley. Thank you.
And if I could, as a member of the budget subcommittee, thank you for your comments. I can speak from my experience. Those were two issues that we talked about at great length. And one of the things the budget subcommittee was very mindful of as we were looking at what the requests were from the various departments were how we were serving our population. And one of the areas that we thought was extremely important to serve was in the area of special ed. And our director of special education is very responsible when it comes to her recommendations on that. And looking at that population, we wanted to make sure that we had that. Same thing with the turf management. It's something that we have noted year over year. We are not a very old building yet. There are real issues that need to be maintained now. And we as a subcommittee felt if it's something that we can get ahead of now, we can stop the bleeding going forward if we ever have to do it again. So we also have an item maintenance, and we were prioritizing that that through the plan that Lindsay and Carlos are putting together. So we took both of those into consideration.
Yeah, if I may, real quick, Joe, you made, or Mr. Freitas, you made an excellent point about the calculation that the state is utilizing. Essentially, the state is telling the town of Berkeley that it's becoming progressively more wealthy. And the target that we work so hard to hit is still shifting away from us because of the fact that the state is mandating, because of our perceived wealth, that we are to pay more. This year alone, our required contribution to the foundation budget went from 51.1 to 52.1.
Yeah.
So a 1% shift is, a significant shift. And that coupled with population change, it's very difficult to be on this side of the table.
I think we all, as members of the finance committees, and knowing what the state mandates become and unfunded mandates is where really the problem lies. I mean, I think everybody understands that, but until our legislators really get to the point of really addressing this issue, communities like ourselves, we're just going to have to continue paying out of our Chapter 70 monies. And so that's where the majority of the problem lies, as they've discussed, is the insurance and costs. Speaking of insurance costs, I know, what was the increased premium for the year, health insurance?
It's a hybrid. Depends what plan you're in. It can be 2% or as high as, I think 6%, depending on which plan each staff member has.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I am the committee's representative on the insurance trust. A year or so ago, we were experiencing some high claim to the point where we were running very low on reserves. So we made some modest benefit changes, pretty much all of which were designed to make our insureds wiser consumers of health insurance, like the co-payment on in-hospital MRIs was increased, but the co-payment on freestanding MRIs remained the same. A few other changes like that, and that's made a significant difference. And so it means, I believe we'll be voting next week on the final premium increases, but they will be modest this year, which is a good thing for our employees because they won't have significant premium costs, but it's also a good thing for the taxpayers because we bear the bulk of the cost of the insurance premiums, and so the increases will be quite modest this year, relatively speaking. The majority of our insureds are in the HMO product, that is the active employees, and that premium will increase less than the premium on the PPO plan, which is sort of it's the more expensive plan. So in that sense, I think we're doing all that we can to control health insurance costs. They're escalating just across the state and across the country, and you hear constantly how health insurance costs are very significant and how it's going to be addressed on a national basis. But we're hoping that we're going to experience modest premium increases for the next few years.
In the next couple of years you're looking at?
It all depends on the experience, but right now the claims seem to be coming in at reasonable levels.
Can I just address the issue of the level service? And I think it was great that Mrs. Alvin has included that. We know that that's something that both towns look at. Where we sit, personally, I can speak for myself, sit in a place where we want to maintain the level of service that both communities are accustomed to. And we want to do that mindful of the budgetary issues that both communities are facing. But just so that you understand that what that level of service is, it very well could look slightly different. Just because if we want to follow what our vision and our mission is and our strategic plans are for the next year, we may be shifting resources, not necessarily increasing the budget, but shifting resources in order to make strides in moving our district to better prepare our students for 21st century learning. So if we think about the Innovative Pathways grant that the district is looking at, that may kind of look differently. There may be shifts in the way that our staffing is or the programs that we offer. It may look like new programs, but essentially it will do two things. It will prepare our students better for the college and career readiness, and it also, as you saw in the formula, may bring other funding into the city, into the district. So just so that you know, we know we have to stay within these constraints, but we try to do it keeping in mind that we want to move forward with goals that the district has set up.
We really would appreciate more money in the city of Berkeley.
Yeah, sure. In the city, yeah.
There are just a couple of points that I'd like to address quickly. Again, first of all, people should be aware, the superintendent mentioned to me earlier today, the concern that was raised about the turf management and also the landscaping that was included in the preliminary budget that we voted on has been changed in this present budget, so that we have reduced the turf management by 50%, and we have eliminated the funding for an outside landscaper to do some of the trimming around the building, and we're going to work toward increasing the efficiency of our own staff. So that's a savings of about $40,000, I believe.
Between the two?
Yes.
About that.
Yes.
Okay. A little bit more.
And then, secondly, I want to address the special education position, the co-teaching position. We talk here about how easy it is to measure our school district by our high-achieving students, but that we owe an obligation to our struggling students as much as our high-performing students. We have a co-teaching model in place in some classrooms, which is an excellent way to approach education for kids on IEPs. But as Mrs. Albanaz pointed out, the guidelines say that the proportion of students in those co-taught classrooms who are on IEPs should be no more than 50%, and that may be pushing the envelope a little bit. You have to think about the students that are in those classes. If we don't have the proper student-teacher ratio, we're really not serving the needs of our kids who are on IEPs, but we're also not serving the needs of the students who are not on IEPs, because they're in a class with a number of students on IEPs that is said to exceed what the best practices are. So from my personal perspective, and I know it's shared by other committee members and by our administration, it's extremely important that we work on reducing that ratio to service the needs of our struggling kids. And so the administration worked very hard to find a way to include that position, and we think we can do it. So any more questions?
I just have a question based off of what you were just discussing with the co-teacher for the special education. With the new schedule change for next year, how are we anticipating those kids that are on an IEP or are struggling to go to an 88-minute class twice a week for the full day? Their whole class schedule will be, much longer. Are we anticipating that with the amount of students that we have enrolled in the school that are struggling or are on some type of assistance, that with all of the teachers that we have are still going to be able to succeed the way they are now in a 57-minute class or whatever it is this year versus next year?
I've worked in a school system that was a complete block schedule, 90 minutes every period, and students with disabilities performed no worse. The students, everyone adapted to the schedule very well. It was never an obstacle. It was never anything that really was of any concern. Students did well in both scenarios. Now, in an 88-minute class, and you don't see this anyway now when you walk in to a classroom, you can't stand and, there is not lecturing that's going on already for the 56-minute class. It certainly wouldn't happen in an 88-minute class. There are going to be a number of different activities that students will be cycling through over the course of an 88-minute class. So it really isn't any concern of ours.
One last thing I want to mention before we wrap up is when I started coming to these meetings, and I've been coming to these meetings for a while now, the budget presentation that Mrs. Alvarez makes as a member of the Finance Committee and talking from that side of the table was always one of the best laid out and best presented budgets that we had a chance to see. And really, if I'm still correct, it's sort of the gold standard, at least in Berkeley, for the...
I win. Your support, that's all I want.
So again, a little bit more Lindsay praise, but the budget presentation has changed and evolved over the years to include a lot of the things such as aid sources and the balances in E&D and things of that nature. So I do think she deserves a pat on the back for giving the most complete budget presentation.
Thank you.
Good job.
That's unnecessary. The decisions aren't made in a vacuum, but we have a great budget subcommittee too, who is really knowledgeable, so that helps.
They deserve the hand also.
Yes, they do.
The subcommittee did a wonderful job.
Are there any other questions from anyone? All right, if there are not, we will close the public hearing at this time, 10 p.m. The committee's next meeting is on March 21st at the Berkeley Middle School Library, at which point we will vote on our final budget number, which I believe will be consistent with the presentation this evening. So thank you very much.
I want to thank the Berkeley people for coming. Thank you so much.
And the Somerset people. And the Somerset.
And
You gave us all the good questions.
Yeah, thank you. You set up Mr. Pierce great tonight.
Yeah, you did.
Did you rehearse
We
this?
rehearsed it earlier
Did you
today.
rehearse?
Did we do okay?
Did a good job.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all for your cooperation.
All right, well, we included on the budget, on the agenda, under budget and financial matters, discussion of the 2019-2020 budget. I just asked that item be put on in case there were any items that we wanted to discuss a little more as a result of our public hearing. Are there any issues that anyone would like to discuss? Remember that we will have the opportunity for further discussion at our next meeting when we vote to finally approve the budget.
On the 21st.
Yes. So if there is no further discussion, are there any questions on the monthly invoices? If there are no questions, I'd ask that everyone sign the warrants before leaving this evening. Next item is a superintendent evaluation timeline. And I believe Mrs. Vaccaro sent us the evaluation form.
You have till Monday.
Yes. And so, we were pushing to get this done quickly. Has the K-8 school committee completed?
On Monday, they did.
They did on Monday.
Just this week.
We'll be right after.
All right, well, I was just going to ask if that's enough time for everyone to complete the evaluation form and return it by Monday? Right. Are there any other questions or issues regarding the superintendent evaluation this evening? Okay. So the next item is follow-up to report on student and faculty bullying presentations. We don't have our student representative here tonight. I was hoping to get some input from him. So I think I'd like to defer that again, if we could. We have a separate list of the students of the month, or is this? Well, I can do it from here. The next item that we have on the agenda is to recognize our February Students of the Month. So we would like to recognize Gavin Borges in science, Mackenzie Quinn Brophy in art, Joshua Correa in world languages, Gage Earl in social studies, Abigail Knight in wellness, Emily McKenna in business, Jared Mello in technology, Emily Naraki in music, Maya Russ in English, and Sierra Santos in mathematics. Thank you. So congratulations to all of them. Next, we have approval of minutes of prior meetings. Mr. Larrabee, would you like to handle the executive session minutes of January 24th, 2019, please?
Absolutely. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the executive minutes, executive session minutes of January 24th, 2019. Any discussion? Before the motion?
No,
Is that how we
after
do it?
the motion.
After, okay.
So moved?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And I abstain. All right, the next item is to approve the open session minutes of February 13, 2019. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved. Second?
Motion made by Mrs. Gagliotti, seconded by Mrs. Field and Mr. Larrabee. Any discussion on those minutes? In the absence of discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Next, topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair in advance of the meeting. There is an item that I just wanted to mention. The Somerset Friends of Music are sponsoring a comedy night at the St. Joseph's Hall in Fall River coming up in April. Do you know the date? I did indicate to them that I would announce it, and I didn't bring the flyer, unfortunately.
Do they have a website that do the, or a Facebook page, Friends of Music?
They should, yeah.
Yeah, they've got it.
They're on Facebook, let me see.
I'm not very good at Facebook, somebody else find it.
I'm having much
Mr.
luck either.
Larrabee is an ace at this.
It is Thursday, April 11th at 6:30 PM at the St. John's Athletic Club.
Great
Yes.
job, Ray.
So
St.
repeat that
John's?
date, please, April.
It's Thursday, April 11th, 6:30 PM. Comedy night fundraiser at St. John's Athletic Club.
And there's also a dinner coming up to support the efforts to put a playground in at Chase in memory of
Mason.
Mason.
And that's also actually a comedy show. That is on
20
Friday, March
29th.
29th
That's gonna be
at
great.
White's.
Correct.
Yes, at White's. And who do you contact to obtain tickets to that event? So that-
Chase Street School.
the Chase Street School. So anyone in the community who's interested in supporting that very important effort to remember Mason should contact the Chase Street School to obtain tickets, and that's the 29th of March. And that's a Friday night, I
Yes.
believe? Okay. All right, well, with that having been said, are there any other items that anyone would like to mention? We don't have a Somerset or a Somerset Berkeley, or a Berkeley update on our agenda, so maybe we could have that at our next meeting.
Yeah, we'll have our meeting on Monday.
Okay, very good. All right, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for coming.